Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me here today as we get to talk about one of my favorite subjects, comic books. My name is Jose. I love comic books. I love talking about them. I love sharing them with you. Feel free to follow me on social media if you would like. Links are in the description below. I've also posted a link to the Marvel fan site that I have plot synopsis and character bios for this issue. I really like this corner box here. So, Captain America 341 from 1988. Captain America versus Iron Man, round number 2. I do have a question though. Why in these digital versions don't they fix the damn coloring? It is obvious that the background color was used. Why can't they fix it in these digital versions? I understand in facsimiles, perhaps they don't want to give you the authenticity, but on a digital version, for God's sakes. Anyway, great cover here as the captain, which will end up being called the U.S. agent when John Walker becomes him, will is fighting Captain America. Cap versus Iron Man. Ron Frenz and Al Milgrom do this cover, and I really like it. I like Ron Frenz. So, break in. And so, we are in California here at Tony Stark's home, and you can see Steve has been waiting a long time here. It says he's finally here. And Mark Gruenwald, by the way, was the editor of Iron Man, and he's the writer of Captain America. So that is part of the reason they did this whole Tony Stark thing here. So Tony was out on a date here, and we have our credits. Kieron Dwyer pencils. Mark Gruenwald, as I mentioned, is the writer, and Al Milgrom is the inker. I love Al Milgrom. Part of what I like about him are these thick brushes that he uses. I don't think he uses pen. He is a brush guy like Klaus Janson. So, and as he walks in, by the way, Tony carries the armor in this little briefcase. Don't ask me how. And he sets his briefcase down and sees Steve, and he is startled. And they're like, "Who's that?" He said, a friend of Iron Man's. "You managed to outwit all of my security devices, Captain. I'm impressed. I designed them myself." And she says, "Let's cut the chit chat and get down to business in private." He says, "Very well." And she's impressed about all the people that Tony knows but doesn't recognize him. And he says, "Lewis, I'm gonna need you to drive Miss Lovett home. She'll be right down." And she's like, "Tony, you promise." He says, "Sorry, Don. Wouldn't do this if it weren't very important. You know that. I'll make it up to you." And you can see when she gets out, grr. So, all right. And so he says, "I take it you've come to tell me how very disappointed you are in what happens between us at the vault last week." And he says, "That goes without saying. I actually have 3 other reasons. First is to return this shield," and he tosses it at Tony. You can see that it causes him a little pain as he goes, "Oof." Real quick, I have a playlist for Captain America and Iron Man. Feel free to check those out here. And so we get a little bit of exposition for new readers here that he made this replacement shield since the government took his away. And so Steve says, "Second, I came to tell you how much damage you did by incapacitating the guards at the vault. You caused a power outage, enabling 5 dangerous criminals to escape, 2 of whom are still at large." And he apologizes. And he said, "Third and lastly, I've come to turn you over to the authorities for your various offenses." And Tony says, "Come on, Steve, you can't be serious." And Steve looks at him with those deadpan eyes. Very nice panel here. And he's like, "Yep, he's serious. I can't let him do that." So he throws the shield And he tells him to catch, and Steve, of course, is like, actually hoped he'd come quietly. So he grabs his suitcase and goes into the room, and Steve's going after him, and he says, or he thinks here, he made this shield for me as a sort of bribe, hoping to buy off my involvement in the guardsman affair. Now that I've given it back to him, I refuse to use it, so he tosses it aside here. I'll just have to batter down his bedroom door and then it's opening, and then of course he comes through with his armor. He says, all right, Steve, how about if we talk this over man to Iron Man? And Steve says, save your breath. And he goes, I don't care if you're wearing the most sophisticated personal weapon systems ever devised. I'm taking you in. And Tony realizes he's still advancing. And he says, don't make me fight you, Steve. And he says, come along quietly and there'll be no fight. And Iron Man says, you must know I can't do that. It would mean giving up my armor, my identity, my very fight for justice. And I want to keep saying Captain America, but the captain says, you should have considered that before you went outside the law. At this moment, he does not have the name U.S. agent. He's simply the captain. And so he says, so he thinks here, Steve does. Despite the difference in our power levels, I have the advantage here. I can't imagine Tony using his armor full power out here in his own home. And he says, Tony, I have to admire your courage, Captain. There's no way on earth you're going to win this one, as he tosses him. And so Knights use of backgrounds. Nowadays, nobody does this. You just need minimal backgrounds. You don't need a lot. You know, the reader can tell this is a wall, perhaps. You see here the carpet and all that kind of stuff here. So Iron Man says, anyone ever tell you how mule-headed you are, Steve? You get an idea like taking me in, and no matter how absurd it is, you pursue it with maniacal intensity. And he continues here, listen to me. I had valid reasons for crossing the authorities as I did. It was my technology the guardsmen were employing. And so just to let you guys know, in case you are not going into the playlist here, this is during his Armor Wars era. That's why he's still wearing the Silver Centurion armor. And so, in the wrong hands, where was I? Could cause in the wrong hands harm that I would be indirectly responsible for. It's better that I neutralize it so the worst cannot come to pass. Don't you see? And Steve grabs Iron Man's legs here. I see what you did. No, not what. I see that what you did was way offline or out of line and caused just some sort of harm you claim you wanted to prevent. And then he's like, how'd he do that so fast? So just he wants, as the Mark Gruenwald wants to show just how agile and fast Steve Rogers is. And so he uses an electric bolt to make him come out, and then he goes to jump on him, but ends up getting the table instead here. Look, Cap, despite our years of friendship, I can no more expect you to understand or approve of what I have to do than you can expect me to understand why you gave up being Cap. And he says, this has become a matter of honor, mister. So real quick, I had a really beat up copy of this issue, and I wanted to get a newer version, and I found it at a comic book store, but they wanted like $50 for it. I'm like, the movie has been over for years now. It was one thing when Civil War, the Captain America movie came out, that they had the little tiff between him and Tony. This is their first fight, but I was like, what? $50 in 2025, you're kidding me. So I went on eBay, found it for $5 and $2 shipping, so $7. Yeah, always check eBay, people. I know that we want to give business to our local comic book stores, but sometimes check eBay. I'm not I'm not so much of, I'm all for people making a buck, but if I can find, I'm also in for finding deals, and I'm not gonna go broke trying to get a couple bucks for another person. So, all right. Um, so I love this panel here. A concept I thought you knew something about, and so Steve is like, "This is pointless. I gotta end this fast." So he uses whatever this. It's not his repulsors because his repulsors come from the hands, but whatever this thing is. So he gets Tony, and Tony is down. You can see that he's shaking here. The effects of my high density beam will fade in a few minutes. He says, "If only I had the shield, I could have deflected the beam." And he says, "Let's face facts here. There's no way you can take me against my will. This fight is a waste of our precious time. I'm leaving now. I don't intend to return here or anywhere you might think of looking for me until my mission is accomplished. I promise you this, Steve. When I have finished what I have to do, I'll look you up and we'll have a long talk about ethics. You have my word." So he leaves. And Steve's like, "Gone, and I have no doubt he has the resources to elude me unless I were to devote all of my efforts to tracking him down. Then there'd still be the problem of overpowering that incredible armors of his." And he says, "Where do my priority lies? Would it be worthwhile to forego all my other responsibilities in order to bring justice to bring to justice one renegade Avenger on a misguided quest? No, it would be far better to give Tony Stark another chance to restore his tarnished honor and keep his word to me." And you see here the end. Now, if you're wondering, wait a minute, that's 8 pages. You're correct. It is 8 pages because this continues with the Captain America, who happens to be John Walker during this time. So this second story is called Free Speech. Now there's 3 stories in here, so this is the second story. So we see who used to be Bucky. He's gonna have a new name, and you're gonna see in a minute. He's got a new costume. And John Walker's like, "Man, they wouldn't let me do any alterations. How did you manage to get it changed?" Now, before I kind of get to that, I'm gonna tell you that when I was in 8th grade, this issue had come out, and the next the next page really made an impression on me. I Even though I'm Puerto Rican and Hispanic, I grew up. I'm Caucasian, and I lived in Florida, in Central Florida, and I lived in a white neighborhood, for the most part. And although my best bud was black, most of the people we hung out with were white because the neighborhood was white. I was the only Puerto Rican. He was the only black dude. We were the only two, but we never experienced anything, at least not in that neighborhood. But I know I went to a predominantly black school, in middle school. And I know other people really did struggle to this. I had just moved from Puerto Rico to Florida, so this next part really, I still remember it, even though it was in 8th grade. I still remember this next page here. So what happened is, he used to be called Bucky because that was the name of Captain America's original partner. So this guy works and says, "Appreciate seeing another high profile black superhero and can imagine how proud you were to get the job." But he says, "What kind of a name is Bucky?" And he says, "That's the name of the original Cap's partner." And he says, and of course they show us Bucky. He says, "I know that. A young white kid who died 40 years ago, more like 80 now. You ask me, that's not a fitting name for a black man who's the same age as Cap and has the same power as Cap and is bigger to boot. Not to not only that, in some parts of the country, buck is an offensive term for a black man. You ask me, I think the government stuck you with that name to keep you in your place. And he goes, hmm. And so he has changed the look. And I think Mark Gruenwald wanted to do this, of course. And I don't blame him. I actually probably would have come up with something similar to that because I always thought Bucky was just not a good name for him. But he goes, so John asks, so what will you be calling yourself? He says, Battlestar. And he says, sounds great. Now, I would have picked not a name called Battlestar, but I understand we're trying to keep with this thing, but I probably would have thought, I don't know, a different name, not Battlestar, but I mean, Battlestar sounds like a cartoon. Remember Brave Star and Black Star and, but hey, whatevs. And so now they are going to go out in a first public appearance here. So here we have the Washington Monument here. And we're just going to skip over all this here. All the people are very proud of them, and they're all clapping, and you see the politician here, as politicians do. And so there's this helicopter here that's flying low, and these two guys come out. Now, their names are the left winger and the right winger. I actually love those terms. I think that is such a cool idea, the left winger and the right winger. And of course, these are two former members of John's Captain America, John Walker's old group, Hector and Jerome. Hector is the right winger, and Jerome is the left, right? Because left hand, right hand. Okay, here we go. And so off they go, and he tells everybody, "Hey, Captain America is John Walker," and then they were gonna say Battlestar is, but of course they don't get a chance to say it. And Captain America kicks him here, says, "You traitor." And left winger says, "Nice to see you too, Johnny. I really missed our old sparring sessions. As for who's a traitor, I'd say it was you and Lamar for ditching your old pals when you got this establishment gig." He takes out the blade or the torch that he used to use when he was a super patriot. And Battlestar says, "Man, I just Battlestar is not my favorite name." But he says, "What's wrong with you, Hector? I thought you had more sense than this. No way you are going to get away with this." And he says, he's Hispanic here, and they just, I think Mark Gruenwald really wanted to bring in the 80s. We sort of forget that the 80s, all decades particularly, but the as society changes, it isn't quite nearly as prevalent now. It is still a very there is still racism, but you don't see it as prevalent as you did in the even the 90s. From the 90s down, each decade you seem to see it less. And in the 80s, things were starting to become a little bit better, but it was still still in there. So Mark Gruenwald really is trying to put it to light, trying to be more socially conscious here. So they're gonna get into a fight, but here he says, "How'd they ever teach you to talk so white?" And so Battlestar punches him and he says, "Since you can't take a hint to shut your mouth, heck, maybe I'll shut it for you," and punches him. And so they continue punching each other, and same as here. And so Captain America says, "We never ditched you two, Jerry. I had the feds check you guys out to see if you could come work for them too. It wasn't my fault you guys had lousy backgrounds. You made your own luck." And that is actually pretty good because a lot of people want to blame other people for their own mistakes. So John Walker here is letting them know, hey, I did my best. And so they continue fighting. We're just going to keep going at it here. And you can see Cap finally brings him down with this kick here. And so the Secret Service finally gets in here. And Mark Gruenwald wants to let us know they must have gotten the politicians away to safety, because that's why they didn't intervene at first here. And so Left Winger says, we still won. And Cap's like, no, we beat you. And of course he says, but we upstaged you two, made you look bad by giving you a hard fight, and revealed your ID to the whole nation. And so he says, don't worry, Lamar. We'll find a way to get your real name out to the public, too. And so as they leave, John Walker realizes that they're right, and that the PR department's going to have a heck of a work trying to fix this thing. And so we see the end, but again, is a third tale. This one is the villain's tale, the Serpent Society, because we're actually going to be setting up some stuff for future events here. So Serpents in Our Midst is the name of this story here, and Sidewinder is introducing the new members, Fer de Lance, Puff Adder, Copperhead, and the Black Racers. It says you may all be seated. What names here? So this is so it was really hard in the 80s to take Captain America too seriously. I look fondly on these stories, but for God's sakes, it's just this is so over the top. And so Sidewinder explains the Serpent Society is a trade union dedicated to giving craftsmen of our particular persuasion the best pay, benefits, and work condition possible. Alone, scattered across the country, each one of us was reasonably successful at our chosen vocation, crime. But banded together, we are phenomenally successful. So he says each one of the founding members cleared over $1 million last year, and that the new members will have a 3-month probation to prove themselves here. And so they're going to have pending assignments tomorrow at 9 sharp. Meeting dismissed. And so, and he says here, and charter members, can you show them to their headquarters, please? And so, she goes, tonight at the usual time, Sidewinder? And he says, of course, Black Mamba. I think of Kobe Bryant when I see that. Look at this supervillains showing. This is just so over the top, I tell you here. So showing them to their rooms here. And so this one leaves here, and this one here is fools, all of them, to think any of the 4 of us are serious about joining their Mickey Mouse Club. I must search this room for bugs and activate this signal beacon. And so minutes later, and so here's the Viper here, and she's saying Viper in Spanish here. And she wants a full report here, and says it's Black Mamba's room. And so she comes in. Someone wants to meet you, and she goes, you're, and she goes, I know who I am, and shoots her here. Help me put that ridiculous outfit of hers. So, this guy here, so you can see that he's changed. So this is what Sidewinder looks like, and he's reading some stuff here, and pathetic, predictable. He hasn't even looked up. So this is like the maid lady, and she's kind of gets in there, and all of a sudden bites her like a vampire, and so he feels like he was injected, and so he's gonna try to teleport, because the cloak has teleportation technology, and she goes to try to get him before, and then he of course is gone and takes off her thing. Says no matter, he can't get far, and in 3 minutes he'll be dead from that snake venom that ejected him. And with that posturing non-entity's desk, the Viper can take her rightful place as leader of the Serpent Society. And so he teleports here, and he's down, and she finds some medicine and gives it to him. And there's you see this kind of bam 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 here, and this guy comes in, Bunk Inspector, so you can see that these two have the cloak, and they teleport away. And so she says, take it easy, handsome. If you want that antitoxin to work, you have to rest, stay calm here. And he's like, save the society. And so she's looking through and sees that the four of them are the four new members are attacking the old members, and so she's gonna call Captain America's hotline next issue, Snake War. So here we go. So three stories, 3 8-page stories, so not too bad. Captain America 341 by Mark Gruenwald and Kieron Dwyer. Like and subscribe, and I do thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.